For centuries, rumours have been circulating that the remains of Noah's Ark exist on Mount Ararat in Turkey. A story that has been preserved in over 300 legends all over the world has now been brought back to life. In the past 100 years, numerous witnesses have reported a wooden structure in the ice, but convincing proof had never been available. To get an expert opinion, a number of scientists were contacted. Tom Zoutewelle studied geology and biology and is a Dutch expert in the specialist field of ark research.
30 years ago, when I was a student of paleontology and geology, I became fascinated by the possibility that remains of Noah's Ark were still on Mount Ararat. At that time, I came to the conclusion that those remains should have been deposited at the foot of Mount Ararat long ago. This because of the movements of the glacier covering Mount Ararat. I concluded that only a cover by volcanic rock, as occurred with the city of Pompeii, could have resulted in a long-time preservation.
So far, a proper scientific publication has been lacking, an essential component when dealing with a case like this. The video footage which was published resulted in a number of questions. Was the video actually recorded on Mount Ararat? If indeed there were wooden objects, were those the remains of Noah's Ark? Couldn't it be the remains of a settlement? And what if fraud was committed? Could that be excluded? All options are still on the table.
Geology had changed a lot over the past 30 years. The new catastrophism had shaken geology on its foundation. The idea that meteorites could have hit the Earth had changed our understanding of the history of Earth radically. But would a story like Noah's flood still fit in modern science? Many advocated that at best it could have been a local flood in the neighborhood of the Black Sea. This was the moment of truth for me. Would I be actively involved in a case that I had closed 30 years ago? I couldn't resist the thought that Noah's Ark was still out there on Mount Ararat. I decided to join in.
In May 2011, Tom was asked to join the latest expedition team as a scientist to exclude the possibility of fraud and find out firsthand what's in the gorge on Mount Ararat. However, bad weather conditions frustrated the expedition. Scientific research at the sites was impossible due to the enormous amount of fresh snow.
We're facing this black reddish rock and this is a dangerous spot. We have to cross it in order to get to the site. And there are a lot of avalanches because the fresh snow, is very unstable. So we're going to discuss it when we go back to base camp, and we'll see what we'll do.
Nevertheless, they could make field observations that enabled the team to determine the geology of the sites. Based on these geological insights, we can draw two important conclusions. The video and photos taken by NAMI during their 2008 expedition are genuine and made at the sites which were designated by our local guides as the location of the wood. So the wooden objects presented in the NAMI video are indeed on Mount Ararat. It's possible to come up with a sequence of events which explain the conservation of the remains of Noah's Ark at an altitude of 4,200 to 4,500 meters.
Although the Anatolian plate on which Mount Ararat is located could have been elevated by plate tectonics up to 2,000 meters, still a sea level rise of 2,000 meters is necessary. Geology has taught us that plate tectonics have been responsible for a considerable sea level rise in the past. All continents have been covered at times by oceans. When Mount Ararat was formed, the Near East was also largely immersed by the sea. The find of a wooden vessel at an altitude of 4,200 meters would put the sea level rise in a whole new perspective.
Let's unravel the sequence of events following the rise of the tectonic plates and the increase in sea level.
The sites of our interest are located in a gorge at Mount Ararat. In this gorge, a unique combination of geological processes have taken place. The gorge probably originated when the volcano that formed Mount Ararat was still active. Landslides triggered by volcanic eruptions or earthquakes could have been responsible for the formation of the gorge. From the moment the gorge was formed, it received erosive material from the top of Mount Ararat. First, debris of volcanic rock was deposited inside the gorge, and over time the summit of Mount Ararat was covered by snow that resulted in the formation of a glacier. In the past, this glacier could have filled the gorge entirely, but at present it only enters the uppermost part of the gorge. At this stage, avalanches of rocks still occurred, resulting in the covering of parts of the glacier by rocks. Because of this unique coincidence, parts of ice became detached from the main glacier and no longer moved downhill. They remained inside the gorge on their present altitude of 4,200 meters, underneath a thick layer of rocks. This is the ice in which, at present, the wooden objects are found.
The wooden items in the gorge could have been derived from an object that was located on the summit of Mount Ararat from early prehistoric times. There's no doubt about the possible conservation of prehistoric wood at this altitude, but still it doesn't give absolute certainty about the nature of the wooden objects. Could it be the remains of Noah's Ark? In order to answer that question, we'll have to gain more insight into the spatial configuration of the wooden objects and the assemblage of items found inside. Dr. Joel Klenk will be one of Tom Zoutewelle's travelling companions during the next phase of our research project.
I am Dr. Joel David Klenk. I graduated from Northwestern. I got my master's and PhD in anthropology, specializing in archaeology from Harvard. I joined the research project team in September of 2010. First, the site is wonderfully preserved and exhibits a wide array of plant materials, including interior structures made of cypress from the family Cupressaceae, caches of seeds of wild barley and rye, and one room with a floor covered in a species of cicer. All of these things suggested a very ancient site with periodic visitations in the site's history. Basically, the size and dimensions, construction materials, and architectural methods do not resemble land-based structures, but are more consistent with a maritime architecture. We're dealing with an ancient archaeological assemblage that has not been manipulated, and that is not a product of a fraud.